My name is Lisa Dean. I live in Oakland, California. The ancestor that I'll be speaking about today is William C.C. Claiborne. And William C.C. Claiborne was the first governor appointed by Thomas Jefferson, who was the president at the time, early 1800s. He was the first governor of what became the state of Louisiana, so right after the Louisiana Purchase. Um, when so I'm 39 now, and my whole life I didn't know about the stories, the legacies, um, the people of my dad's side of the family. And I grew up knowing about my mom's side, but not my dad's side. And it was never anything that I was interested in or curious about because of the way that my dad didn't talk about it. And it wasn't until I was 37, so 2 years ago, that I had a dream that I was on a plantation. And I didn't know how to talk about this dream. I didn't talk about this dream because it wasn't anything that I was used to talking about. I wasn't used to talking about history, and let alone slavery. And it wasn't until a year later when that dream was with me. Something in me changed, something in me opened, where I was a little bit more attuned to stories. And so a year later, I got the courage to ask my dad about his side of the family, and with some hesitancy, I gently had to state my case, and he said, "You're not gonna like what you find." And was then that I received from an aunt what I recognize now as the 1850 census that stated that William C.C. Claiborne, who was an ancestor, had enslaved 9 people, 5 men, 4 women. And that's what started my journey of learning about the history, the stories of that side of the family, those ancestors. And I took a year sabbatical to go to Louisiana, live in New Orleans, and study this man who was an ancestor of previous white settler colonizers and enslavers. And so the story gets longer and wider. And during this year, it was really challenging, and yet it was the first time in my life that I felt like I was living in purpose. It was the first time that I started to feel not only history getting pieced together, but subsequently myself getting pieced together. It was the first time when I felt myself become more whole, and that doesn't mean that it was easy. It was like a paradigm shift of who I thought I was, and putting myself in the context of history and the legacy of settler colonizers and enslavers. And there was times that I was confused, that I didn't know what all of this was for, where it was going, how was this moving toward what I hoped for, which was healing. And yet there was always this knowing that this was the way to be daylighting the stories, to piece together this mysterious past that is still alive and pulsing in today. And so in terms of atonement, in terms of making amends, where I am right now in this lifelong journey is continuing to daylight William C.C. Claiborne's legacy, the previous and other politicians to follow. Most of this history was not in the archives, most of the history about the bedrock of their success. These politicians, these white politicians' success was bred off of the institution of slavery, and yet hardly mentioned at all. So my purpose right now is to daylight these truths, is to share information, and then as my role as a teacher, it's to incorporate history as a living entity that is a culmination of stories, that the more voices you get, the more perspectives you can pull from, that you can include, the texture of the story gets more dense, it gets wider, it becomes more alive. And so I hope to bring history in a way that is a part of our everyday conversation and who we understand ourselves to be. And what I'll end with is, this process of uncovering these buried truths in my family, in my experience, has been, for me, healing. And I say that because there were so many parts of me in everyday society, and hearing instances of inequality, of racism that didn't make sense, that were real, and yet I couldn't put into context. And knowing this history that is in me, that has benefited my life, has helped me to find meaning and to give me something to move from. It's now I have something to work from.